What happens when a favorite Marvel comic character's credibility goes off the rails on the way to their film debut? The answer? A lot. Especially during the early years of this wave of Marvel cinematic films. Maybe the scripts weren't ready, personality issues disrupted the set, or dodgy CGI. Don't be fooled again. Buy yourself the peace of mind that subscribing to CBR brings. And it's free. Just hit that subscribe button.
This is not it, Spider!
The Rhino. If you're old enough to remember the good old days when Spidey slung webs through psychedelic skies in the original 1967 cartoon, you can say, web slinger, you've come a long way, baby. One of Parker's original foes in the cartoon was the Rhino. His reboot in Spider-Man 2 comes via Paul Giamatti's portrayal of Aleksei Saitsevich, except this time he's pimped out with prison tats and a Rhino-themed mech battlesuit. Back in the day, he would buck over his foes with a mad charge. Now he does that along with a hail of rockets and heavy machine gun fire. Something about Rhino's limited participation in Spidey 2 seemed tacked on. Not faulting Giamatti in the least, he's a superb actor, but the temporary-looking tattoos, the mech suit, or that accent aren't doing him any favors. Maybe if he had more screen time to develop his character, which seems to only consist of robbing and smashing, maybe films just aren't his thing.
Very good, man.
Very good, man.
Very good.
Whiplash. Ring ring, who is it? It's Mickey Rourke calling in his role as Whiplash in Iron Man 2, and seriously, why would he have to try when his hairdo can carry a scene? Featuring yet another Russian accent on the list, we seem to notice this pattern that Marvel has trouble nailing their villains. They gave them impressive weaponry, like laser whips that can half a limo like a pop can on a hot summer's day, but all of that CGI glitz isn't enough to build a captivating and apt movie character. It's fair to say this rests on Rourke's shoulders because in his scene he looks like he's hanging out at home instead of giving a movie performance. With his volume dialed way down, his character, Ivan Vanko, suffered greatly in the process.
Agreed.
And all of this was a crying shame because Whiplash could have easily been a way more entertaining villain than the totem pole we got instead. All of this could have been averted with a different casting choice. Sorry, Mick. We still love you, man.
I wouldn't go in there for 20 minutes.
The Mandarin.
You know who I am. You don't know where I am. And you'll never see me coming.
What's on the federally approved food pyramid and most likely to choke you? A mandarin. Not the little oranges, but Iron Man's greatest nemesis, and we're talking Joker level of archenemy. First off, they both have genius caliber IQs, they both come from wealthy families, and they're not too shy to take it outside from time to time. Which isn't a light matter considering that Mandarin is one of the planet's most deadly martial artists. So this guy's looking ripe for an appearance somewhere in the Iron Man franchise. Third time's the charm because Oscar winner Ben Kingsley signed on to the role. How could this fail? Maybe production should have run the script through a typewriter a lot more because Iron Man's impressive adversary of old was turned into a pussycat and not a villain at all. Someone had the bonehead idea of downgrading Mandarin to an actor named Trevor Slattery.
Bloody hell, bloody hell.
Acting as a decoy, shielding the identity of Guy Pearce's Aldrich Killian.
I am the Mandarin!
When Iron Man nabs Slattery, he's just as disappointed as we are to learn Mandarin's a junkie and a fraud.
Nice helmet.
Keeps my face pretty.
Juggernaut. Okay, so already we're dealing with The Last Stand, admittedly the weakest entry in the X-Men filmography. To be fair, Brett Ratner took on the directing duties late in the game, and that does explain some of the flatness pressed in the film. In comparison to the first two flicks, The Last Stand lacked their emotional center and quality of story. Hell, this film created a plot continuity problem for the series. In The Last Stand, the authorities have a vaccine to cure mutants, and while it raises an interesting philosophical issue, what do we do with that afterwards? Forget about it? I guess because that's what happened. Last Stand feels like a placeholder film in the series, and some of the characters are flat. Not you, Kelsey Grammer, you did awesome as Beast. Vinnie Jones's Juggernaut falls in the less awesome column.
You can let me out of here, I need a pee.
Sure, he's built for the role, but as Jones himself and his ridiculous costume feel as real as styrofoam rock in an old Star Trek episode. In comic book form, Jug is a punishing villain. He can topple mountains for Christ's sake. In the movie, he just looks #sad.
We have to bring in help now.
Well, hey, why just NASA? Why not the Army or the CIA? We could send our political prisoners there. Waterboarding in the fourth dimension could prove very effective.
Dr. Doom, 2015. It seems that Dr. Doom is constantly shafted in his movie appearances, and with a name like Doom, you'd expect a little bit more care would be taken in his representation. In the case of 2015's Fantastic Four, they dolled him up like a techno crash dummy, and even donning his metal mask doesn't distract from the lackness of the CGI. Production-wise, problems were omnipresent, and this trickled down to Toby Kebbell's performance by neglecting Doom's backstory. This had to be unbearable for the British-born stage actor, but I'm sure he was thinking, get through this and I can do 1,000 plays. So he had to go through the motions of being nothing more than a mocap cardboard cutout bad guy, without really accomplishing anything. It's a shame that no one has mastered the secret recipe for the perfect movie Dr. Victor Von Doom, but we're not giving up hope yet. Failure often eventually leads to success, and one day we'll finally have a proper Doom to flee from.
Ooh, my spider sense is tingling. If you know what I'm talking about.
VENOM. Coming into possession of a sentient tar-like supersuit that augments all of your already super acumen was a dire lesson for Tobey Maguire. Parker tried to warn Eddie Brock, a rival photographer at the Daily Bugle, played by Topher Grace. In an action-packed face-off between Spider-Man and Venom, Venom's taken possession of Brock, stringing Parker up until James Franco's Green Goblin buys Peter time by crashing the party.
Looks like just in the nick of time.
A couple minutes ago wouldn't have been so bad either.
Speaking of flawed Marvel renditions, check out Franco's Goblin. As for Venom, he ought to have been a vile and terrifying adversary. However, this translation suffered in Spider-Man 3. His lackluster appearance in the film can be accredited to production problems, namely packing too many villains into the movie.
Where do all these guys come from?
This overpopulation diluted their character development, and the CGI looks kinda sloppy. Venom was a disappointment to fans from story to form, and Marvel could have given us Venom with more bite that looked more believable.
Mr. Von Doom, are you okay?
Never better, Jimmy.
Dr. Doom, 2005. It seems that the Fantastic Four are fated to lackluster movies, which just isn't fair. They're a cool squad with cool powers, and that ain't no stretch. Wink wink.
That's gross.
And it's Doomsday for Julian McMahon's character, and everyone felt that Victor Von Doom would be in capable hands. That wasn't the case, as his performance of the caped metalhead could be considered as popcorn fare.
Why the long face?
Again, the villain seemed underdeveloped, which is a systematic foible for Marvel enemies. In conversation with then-director Tim Story, he looked back at this half-bake offering and admittedly that when the film was made, it was at the first crest of big-budget superhero movies, and the genre was just taking its first wobbly steps. Too bad for us that Julian McMahon didn't step up to the occasion and deliver the doomy goods for the supervillain. Granted, the costume designer stayed true to his titular look, but looks alone aren't enough. As we pined before, here's hoping that Dr. Doom can one day get the proper attention he rightfully deserves in another Fantastic Four flick.
Shouldn't play with knives.
The Punisher. The Marvel comic hot lead broker known as Punisher was a formidable figure, unimbued with any special powers, except a vicious trigger finger, and that worked well for him in a plethora of comic stories. In the second Punisher movie starring Thomas Jane as the vigilante who's out for revenge for a-holes who treated his wife and child like speed bumps, a la Mad Max, this outing was a co-production between Marvel and Lionsgate Films, but Marvel's hands were tied in respect to creative contribution in this schizophrenic production. The budget was chopped in half to roughly 30 million bones, and how are you going to make a slick, cohesive movie on a paltry budget like that? From head to toe, the film was scattered and couldn't decide if it was a comic book or a movie, mixing the two in a willy-nilly fashion.
I can hear what you're thinking, all your doubts and fears.
There is a lack of cohesion and purpose in the story. Characters and a lot of the cinematography were flat, uninspired templates from a back catalog of other films. All in all, the Punisher film sorta looks like a gorier version of Miami Vice. Even this Punisher was made during the formative MCU era, and it could have been a lot better. THROG. No, this isn't a typo, and he's on our wish list. THROG is a bona fide Marvel character who's an amphibian not to be fudged with. He always wasn't a toad, though, starting his adventure off as Walter Simonson, a kind-hearted and generous college football star who later married the woman of his dreams. The dreams turned to nightmare as a sorceress takes the life of his wife and unborn child, then promptly turning Simonson to a frog. What's a frog to do other than take a walk in Central Park, where he's embroiled in a skirmish between rats and other croakers, one of who saved him and giving him the nickname Puddle Gulp. Fantastic! The amphibian who saved him was Thor in Kermit form, but his astral goats arrive, taking him back to Asgard. The rats re-emerge, and Puddle Gup uses a shard of Thor's tiny hammer to fend them off, transforming into Throg. Throg has yet to make a movie appearance in the MCU. Not that Throg couldn't be brought to life. After all, Rocket Raccoon and Groot totally worked.
Quit smiling, you idiot. You're supposed to be a professional.
But a tiny frog Thor, albeit pretty hilarious, is trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Maybe if the MCU produces a bog-based super critter movie with a lot of backstory, Throg would be in like Flynn. Marcus, the werewolf centaur symbiote. Right, so take your DNA blender, set it to maximum, and let it run for a couple of hours. You might be the proud parent to something as bizarre as Marcus, the werewolf, blah blah blah. Just give him his insulin shots, he's diabetic. Anyways, it's no crazier than his origin story. Beginning as a centaur warrior who is then bitten by a werewolf, mind melded with an alien symbiote, a diabetic, and he signed up to, Dracula's army. Happens every day, and that's why we couldn't pass up on this double rainbow. Despite he's never been in a Marvel movie, there's probably 99 reasons for that, but we're still going with the centaurs being a weird mix in the MCU. Sure, he's appeared on the pages of Deadpool's Gauntlet number 8 and number 10. If he were to blow up in Hollywood, say via Deadpool, he'd be able to deliver with his list of strengths. One is super eating, which rightfully remains at the bottom of the apple barrel. Deadpool and he fought numerous times, concluding with Marcus being squished by Deadpool in a steamroller. That's a title stamp if we ever heard one, but it's safe to say, hey, it'll never happen.
Should have pressed the panic button.
Well, I panicked, but then I handled it.
Alrighty then, that's the list on how Hollywood bunged up our beloved Marvel characters. Where do you think that burden lies? The CGI limitations of the time? Production problems? Infighting? Or a lack of attention to the script? Stressful, isn't it? Sound off in the comments section below, and don't forget to hit the red stress-relieving button below to stay up to date with CBR.